Good afternoon. Welcome to today's CI Tools webinar. My name is Josh Osborne and I'm the product manager for the CI Tools here at Central Innovation. And this is a weekly webinar that we run to talk about things to do with the CI Tools. Today, we're going to be looking at the coverings tool, and specifically, we're going to be looking at the roof covering tool. I had a couple of questions about that this week. So we're going to have a look at, we'll start with the basics of roof coverings, but then we'll go into a couple of things that maybe you didn't know that you could do with coverings. We'll look at using styles for our coverings and some things like that. So yeah, coverings for today, I'm going to be using ArchiCAD 28, but most of the features that we'll be looking at are available in older versions as well. So long as you're using 26, 27, or 28, pretty much everything that you see today will be applicable to what you're using there. If you're using a version prior to ArchiCAD 26, or if you're using a current version but you're still using the old deprecated object, then some of these things won't apply to that. But if you're using the newer object, the standard one, then yeah, most of what we're looking at will cover you as well. If you have any questions about anything that we go over today, just enter those in the chat panel, and I'll see if I can answer those at the end of the session. And if you think of anything after the webinar has run, you can send those through via email to nz.support@centralinnovation.com and just ask your question there, and our tech support team can help you. Also, if you have any suggestions for future webinar topics, you can also send those through to nz.support@centralinnovation.com and just say, hey, got an idea for a thing that I'd like to see covered in a future webinar, and that will give me something to do for next time, because I haven't thought that far ahead yet. I think that's all of the housekeeping things out of the way. I guess the other thing to mention just briefly as well is that if you are using the ArchiCAD 29 tech preview, then the CI tools are also available for that. So if you want to get CI tools for the ArchiCAD 29 technical preview, just email our support team. So again, that's nz.support@centralinnovation.com. Send them an email and just say, hey, I want to get the CI tools for the tech preview, and they can send you a link with the downloads and also the documentation on how to install the tools in ArchiCAD 29. Obviously, the full release of ArchiCAD will mean that you can install the CI tools using the installer itself when that day comes. But for now, the technical preview, just contact our support team and they will get you sorted out. All right, with that out of the way, let's have a look at some roof coverings. So just to cover off the basics of roof coverings, as you can probably tell by the name, they are coverings for roofs. They let you add claddings to your roofs. You can see at the moment I've got some roofs on this building and they look kind of flat, and the reason for that is because they are in fact kind of flat. They are just roof slabs that have a corrugate texture on them to make them look as though they have corrugation on them, but they are, of course, not actually corrugated. So if you were to cut a section through these roofs, I've got a detail element here so you can see some insulation there, but obviously we are not reflecting the corrugate at all or showing any sort of edge boards or anything like that. And so that is where the coverings tool comes in, and specifically the roof coverings tool in today's case. So what this will do is that it will allow us to add a bunch of additional data to our roofs to give us a bunch of extra detail in 3D so that it looks more like the thing that is representing. And also because all of the elements that are added are modeled elements, it means that we can cut a section through the roof and we'll be able to see the actual parts of the roof that are placed using the covering. So it will save you additional time when you get to things like drawing your elevations, drawing your details, that sort of thing. It will be doing quite a lot of the work for you in those cases. So yeah, makes that nice and quick to do, but it also will make your 3D views look nicer as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the element that we want to put a cladding on, and we go to the CI Tools menu, Coverings, and we choose the Roof Coverings. And this will bring up the Roof Coverings dialog where we choose the object that we want. As I mentioned before, we're not going to be using the deprecated roof covering object. We made a pretty major overhaul to the object over a year ago now, to the way that that works. However, there's quite a lot of people who either prefer the old tool or just haven't gotten around to migrating to using the new object. So that's why that is still available there, so that nobody loses anything that they had. But if you're placing new roof coverings, I would recommend using the new roof covering objects, which is just called CI Tools Roof Covering. And it has this kind of blue icon here. So we're going to select that. And what we'll do is we'll just do the basics here. So we'll go through and we'll choose what kind of cladding we want to place, and then we'll place this one down. So looking at my 3D view here, you can see it's defaulted to some corrugation, and we've got a downpipe and a gutter and some flashings around here. So I'll just go to the cladding setting here, and instead of corrugated metal, I'm going to choose to use shingles. So just make that one change. I'll hit OK, and then it will go through and place that covering on my roof. So you can see without having to do much extra work, we now have shingles placed all along our roof. We've got flashings on the edges, we've got gutters on these edges, as well as edge boards, all of the things that you might expect with your roof. And if I go to my section view, you'll be able to see that we have those essentially having done the work for us. So you can see we've got an edge board attached to our roof now. We have our shingles, we've got our framing, that's part of the roof covering as well, and then we are showing our gutter on the edge here also. So it's just done a lot of the work for you so that you don't have to do that. And we can also do things like, so obviously, if you decide that your shingles are the wrong size, we can come in here and we can say, actually, the shingles are 500 by 500, and they are 18 mil thick. Hit OK, and automatically our section is up to date with those changes. So it means you don't have to mess around with resizing things that you've drawn in your section and making sure they match the 3D and all that sort of thing. And if we go to 3D, that will automatically be reflecting those changes as well once it rebuilds. Okay. So you can see those changes there. So it just makes it nice and easy to do all of that stuff. And as I said before, it gives you that additional detail in your views without you having to do a bunch of extra work to get that to happen. Now, there's a couple of extra things that we might want to add onto this, namely the downpipes, which you'll notice we don't have any of, and that's because it simply doesn't have any way of knowing where you will want the downpipes, so we have to turn those on. So if I go back to my floor plan view of this project, that's not views, that's my project map. Go up to the first floor, so you can see the cladding is represented in my floor plan view here. And if I select it, you'll see that on the gutter edges, we have these purple hotspots at the ends, and these are the gutters. So we can come in here and we can say, grab this hotspot, sorry, not gutters, downpipes, and we can move this along to wherever we want to have the downpipe showing there. So move this in just from that end, and then we'll go to the other end and move that hotspot in there. And then we can do the same over on this edge. These will only show on gutter edges, obviously, so we don't get them running up the sides here, but we do on these two. So we've got those now. So if I go back into 3D, we'll see some gutters sprout out of the, sorry, some downpipes sprout out of the gutters here, so you can see those there. And if I select this now, you can also see that we get a series of hotspots to adjust how far in or out the kick end for the downpipe is, and how far out from the wall it is, and that sort of thing. So you can adjust that as needed as well. You can see we've got some brackets there, but it is hovering a certain distance away from the wall, so we can adjust those either in 3D or in our floor plan view by just grabbing hold of this hotspot here and moving it back to where it needs to be. That looks about right. Then if I go back to 3D, we'll see that this one has moved. No, I pushed it too far. I think I pushed it up to the wall instead of the wall cladding. But you can see it allows us to do that. So now that we've got sort of roughly what we wanted to do with that, let's have a look at some of the settings that are available in there, just so that you can see what other things you can do with this. So going into the roof covering settings, obviously the main, the first page of this interface is configuration. In most cases, you won't need to touch anything here, but if you do need to modify the thickness of how the spacing will be between the roof and the roof cladding, so that you can put in rafters, you can adjust the thickness there if you need to do that. In most other cases, you won't need to touch any of these. The only times you'll need to do that is you've got something particularly complicated going on with edges or something like that, and you need to override the settings in some way. You can come here to do that. But most of the time, we can ignore this page. And claddings is the page that we'll look at in most cases to start with, which is where we choose the actual cladding that we want. So we have a variety of them available. We've got flat, which will just place a flat piece of cladding. Corrugated metal will obviously have corrugation showing there. Then we've got the ribbed metal, which is similar to that, but has straight edges instead of being curved. Shingles and tiles are available there, and then also Spanish tiles as well. And with each of these settings, over on the right here, you can also see that we can control the building material. So this is set to steel at the moment. And then we can override the surface of the building material as well. So we can say building material is steel, but we want the surfaces to be painted with lead oxide yellow, and it will do that for us. So we're still getting the building material there so that if we run a component schedule, we can get the values out for the amount of steel used, but we can still override it with the paint color that we want. Also, we have this button here, which is a little sort of sun icon. And if we choose this button, essentially what it does is that it will only apply the overrided paint color effectively to areas that are actually visible. So you won't get the underside of the covering painted yellow or anything like that, which also means that you can run a surface schedule to see the amount of surface area that's covered with this paint, and it won't be giving you the values for the underside of the cladding or anything like that, which you probably want in most cases. So you can control those there. And then in the settings under shingles, we can define the size of the actual shingles themselves, whether they have an overhang and that sort of thing. So we could go through and we could say we want to have ribbed metal, but we want the ribs to be 33 wide at the top, and at the bases we want them to also be 33. And then the height is C. I think we can make that, let's go 75 so that you can see it easily, and it will give us these essentially rectangular ribs sticking up at that value there. We can also enter an angle here to choose what angle it is going across the roof. So if I hit OK, you'll be able to see those ribs are running straight up and down there. But if you need them to run in the opposite direction, you can just change this to 90 degrees instead, and it will do that for us instead. So it'll just run across the roof instead of straight up and down. And all of these different cladding types have similar options for the types of things you can do. So for the corrugate, we choose the distance between the peaks, the height and the thickness of the corrugate, and then we can also set the angle there as well. Moving on from the actual cladding itself, I'll just change back to ribbed for now. We can have a look at the flashing. So we have a couple of flashing options available. We've got the flat option, which is the default and is probably what you'll use in most cases, but there are plenty of other options here. So we could say, let's have a rolled flashing, and you'll see that it shows the roll there, and we can control the size of that using the dimensions set out here. And then we can also choose the flashing for different parts. So we're looking at, we can also choose it from here as well. So at the moment we're choosing barge flashing, but we can click on the hip ridge flashing, or click it from the menu here, and it lets us control the flashing there. The same as for the apron and for the valley as well. So we can define how the flashings work for all of those. If you want them to work differently on barges than you do on ridges, you can come in here and say that actually I want this one to be square tiles instead for some reason, and we'll get tiles running across the ridge flashing as well there. Now coming down to framing, we've got the option to choose whether you want to have framing or not. So we can choose timber framing, airspace only will give us no framing at all. And then the different steel section options will give us different steel sections, as you can probably guess. So we can choose a steel Z section, for instance. We can define the shape of those And then if I click OK and then go back to that section view that we had, you'll be able to see this one here. You'll be able to see those Z-shaped framing pieces all the way up the roof there. So we can control how that works, or if we want it on at all. I'll leave those as Zs for now. Soffits lets us control how the soffits will work, so we can choose the I think we call it the width, but the size of them in that direction, and the thickness of them, and how far they drop down from the underside. And then we can control those for the fascias, the barges, the ridges, and the ridges, just those three, sorry. So we can control those settings there. And with the soffits, we can also control where they are using hotspots in the 3D view. So if I grab this hotspot here, that will allow me to adjust the width. So you can have different soffit widths on different edges if you need to as well. So we can make this one quite a lot deeper than the ones over here, and it will draw those soffits further in. Moving down to edge boards, these will control obviously the boards on the edges there. We've got options for timber, metal, or recessed metal, or just no edge boards at all. So we can go through and choose what we want there and then define the dimensions for those. We've got the same controls here for the building material and the surfaces, and we can also apply them to the fascias, the barges, or the ridge boards there as well by using these settings. Gutter obviously will define the gutter shape, so we can choose what kind of gutter we want to use. So we can go colonial here, and then we can go through and change any of the dimensions of those, so you can set that up to match what you would normally use. And then related to that, we also have the downpipe, so we can choose if it should be rectangular or circular, and then define the various parts of it that you need to there. So the angle that the kickback will go, the distance it will drop, the size of the brackets, and all of that sort of thing. Gable end walls will let us choose what the walls will look like if you're doing a gable end. So we have it set to none at the moment, but we could put weatherboards across the gable end or something like that if you need to. Same settings roughly for freezers and finials as well, so we can apply those to our project. There's a couple of options, and then once you choose the type that you want, you get controls for how the finial will actually work. And the same for the freezers, so you control what you want, and then it will draw those on. You can see those in the preview there. That was the last of the settings. So we can go through and make whatever changes we need to, hit OK, and we get those to come through on our roof. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to just quickly show you is the mitering of the roof coverings as well, because we can get them to miter, which you may want to do in some cases. So looking at my second roof here, I'll select those two roof planes and go to CI Tools, Coverings, Roof Coverings. I'm going to go with the ribbed because this makes it nice and easy to see what we're doing. We'll set that to 25 at the top and 25 at the base, so we get straight ribs there, and I'll just change the color on it so it's a bit easier to see what we're doing. So we'll go with a light blue there, hit OK, and that will place our roof covering for us. So you can see the ribs running up and down the roof there. We've got our edge flashings and our gutters as before, and we've got flashings up on the ridge there. However, you do have the option to also get the claddings to just continue over and miter on the top, which you may want to do, probably not in this case, but in similar cases. Flashings, and then we go to the ridge option, and at the moment we're matching the barges. What we want to do instead is we want to say let's miter the cladding instead, hit OK, and that will just carry those straight across the ridge there, so there's no flashing at all. There's a couple of other options that you may have noticed there as well. So instead of mitering, we can also say none. So that will do exactly what it sounds like. It will be similar to what we had before, only they're not mitered. They will just stop at the end of the roof. We've got flat and square and all of the other options that we had before as well. And then we've got match the barge flashing as well. So this will just choose whatever you have set on the barge flashing options. So those will just sort of carry through to each other in that way, if you want to use those. Now, the other important part to know about the roof covering is that we can override the types of edges that the roof is detecting. So the roof covering will try to figure out what your edges are doing. So it will figure that the lower edge, it generally will have to have a gutter on it. The sides will have barges on them. The top will be ridges and that sort of thing. However, we can override those settings to get it to do other things as well. So if I go into the, if I select my coverings first and then go to CI Tools, Coverings, Edit Roof Covering Edges, it'll bring up a little preview here and you can see what each of the edges is set to do at the moment. So what I can do is I can go in here and I can say the eaves on this roof, they're currently set to be a gutter, but I want that to be a barge instead. And then the eaves on the other side are currently set to be gutters. I can set that to have none. And then the ridge at the top, instead of getting a junction, I can put an apron there. And then we just hit OK, and that will make those changes for us. So you can see we now have an apron flashing at the top of our roof on the ridge there, where before we had a flashing. On the edge that we had none set, we've got none showing up there at all. And on the edge that, oh, sorry, that's the one that has none set, and this one has a barge set. So you can see that barge board is placed on the edge there. Is that what I'm looking at? No. Edge boards here, timber. Did I set that to none as well? Maybe I did. Sorry about that. Okay, something funny is going on there. Apologies. What have I done? Okay, I'm not quite sure what I've done wrong there, but normally that would put a an edge board on there for us, or is it is in fact putting an edge board on. It's just that it's the same material as the roof has, so I couldn't tell. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, plenty of controls for what we want to do there with the roof cladding itself. And then if you do need to override any of those edge types, you can do that using the Edit Roof Edges command. So that's from the Coverings menu, Edit Roof Covering Edges. Make sure that you have the coverings selected first. Before you do, you can select as many of them as you want, and they will all come up in that preview there. So we can go back in and go Edit Roof Covering Edges, and we'll see all three. A little bit of overlap there, but you can see what we're doing. We can zoom in and out on here to figure out which edge we're looking at and then just select it and then choose what the edge should do there. All right, that is the main things that I wanted to cover with the roof covering today. I'm just going to quickly have a look at the chat and see if there's any questions before we finish up. All right, it looks like we don't have any questions at this stage. So I'll finish up for now. But if you do think of anything that you wanted to ask later on, just as I said before, send those through to nz.support@centralinnovation.com, and that will either be answered by the support team or they'll forward it on to me. But yeah, that has been the roof coverings tool. Unless I hear any suggestions before then, I'll probably do the same for wall coverings next week. So we'll have a look at those. There's a bit more going on with wall coverings because we have different things that can happen on different corners and that sort of thing. So we'll dive in and look at all of the settings for wall coverings next week. But that's all from me for today. Thanks for your time, everyone, and I hope to catch you at the next one.